Okay, so let's talk about Winston at a really high level and how to actually play Winston in Overwatch 2. This is in addition to what I already talked about Winston Playstyles in my earlier video. So when you're playing Winston, a lot of people don't fully understand that with Overwatch 2, you don't have a second tank, and because you don't have a second tank, you are not able to like avoid taking a lot of damage. For instance, in Overwatch 2, whenever you are playing, or in Overwatch 1, whenever you're playing Winston and you wanted to attack the enemy team and go up there, what you would do is you would come over here and you would jump like this. However, this is very, very bad in Overwatch 2. The reasoning is when you do this, oh man, 1 second. Gotta love my mechanics. There we go. When you do this jump, you are actually in the enemy LOS all of this way. And you have no DM, you have nothing. Sure, you could get pre-healed, but you are probably going to lose half your HP if there's any type of range damage dealer over here or like under over here on that little plank. So that's very bad. So the question is, how do you deal with this? How do you jump on someone without actually taking this much damage? Well, there are a few different ways. The first way is pathing in a way which you will take less poke. So this way, you'll enter in like this, play under here. Your healer behind you can still heal you. Then you'll come over here, and then from here, you'll be able to jump under. By jumping under, your only time that you're actually even being able seen is maybe like right at that tip there. Hence, you take a lot less pre-damage. Where, again, when you're over here, the moment you step out right over here, you're going to take damage. And the moment in this whole entire jump, you're going to take damage. And sure, you could butt jump, but the fact matters, you're still going to take damage. Another way to approach this is what's called a double jump strategy. And there are a few Winston players that do this quite a lot. Gushui, Fearless. There's a Winston player from a long time ago called No Smite. I think he's actually in League now, and he won the World Championships. I'm not sure. But what you do is you jump over here. Well, whoops. You basically jump from there to over here. And the logic why this works is because you are playing under the range damage. The range damage is your biggest threat, and that's what you're essentially scared of when you're actually moving around. So by playing under the range damage, you don't take damage. Obviously, the enemy team could have mobile damage, such as a Tracer, and if they do, the Tracer could push you right over here. And if you play with your Tracer over here, you'll live. Or if your Ana just plays right over there, your Ana can heal you, and the Tracer, you'll be able to live versus the Tracer. Then from here, what you'll do is you'll jump up like that, and you'll achieve the same exact, value. So the whole concept of this is to actually maximize your jump arch so you take less damage. One other example of this is this. A lot of people, when they play Watch Point, I always see that they'll always look to jump from here all the way up here. This is the same exact problem because when you jump from here, your jump arch is so big. Literally, anyone over here can pretty much start shooting you from here all the way up, which is very, very bad. Hence, what you want to do is you want to look to jump under again from here and jump like this. And this way, the only time people normally see you is normally when you're right over here. If somebody is over here, then you might want to actually soft dive them first, apply some pressure. Maybe don't use bubble because you don't need to, and it's like bad bubble. You should just soft dive without bubble, and then chill. And then after that, you'll have your jump again, and you can jump with bubble. It's a more of a, not a hard dive, but a dive that essentially will help you hold space a little bit longer and apply more pressure. The next thing to understand when you're playing Winston is when you're jumping, you should never, ever, ever jump in an open space. Like jumping like right over here, people are here, is very bad. You want to make sure you're either able to drop down so you're able to stabilize and live. Your supports are also in your LOS, or you're jumping near a corner that you can sort of like play around and poke. Two other things that I mentioned. Your value as Winston is like having high uptime. So what I mean by that is basically being able to sort of like stay in the fight for as long as possible. And how that works essentially is if you're trying to do that, you need to make sure that you don't get poked out. So it's very important that you're sort of in positions where the enemy team can't see you and you're listening and understanding where they are, and then from there you sort of drop and you sort of catch them, by surprise. A lot of people also are wondering, when you look to play Winston, you right click and you do that and you sort of like, do the combo. That is very good if you're going on a solo target, but if you're going on multiple targets, it's not really worth it. Or if the target's like flying in midair like a Mercy, it's probably not worth trying to like hit that shot. I mean, if you're very good, maybe you can, but it's normally not worth it. The last thing I sort of want to talk about is that when you're playing Winston also, understanding your actual, like, are you jumping into your range damage or are you jumping from an angle where your range damage doesn't see you? For instance, if there's like a Widow up there, what you could maybe do is you could maybe try and like jump behind. For instance, you can maybe come from here and then jump like this. This way, you catch the Widow by surprise, and even if the Widow were to see you like right over here, or sorry, the Widow wouldn't be able to see you because the Widow is expecting you to be main, hence you get a lot of value. Likewise, this is just like primal. So like maybe if you wanted a primal, instead of just like jumping up here and like primaling and then like doing a bunch of damage, like where everyone can see you, maybe look to maybe try and like jump into a position where, you know, you're under the range damage, and then like jump up like where you're not going to take a lot of initial poke, and then from there, you know, look to primal and go somewhere else. So it's very important that like you understand how to manipulate the space and your jumps so that when you're actually jumping, you don't have these insane arches that are in enemies range-based LOS. Or in general, you try and do creative jumps where essentially the enemy team doesn't see you. An example of this that I might actually have, let's see if I, an example of this will actually be in the video earlier. So if you watch this earlier video or later, depends how we edit it, you'll see an example of how Gushue essentially does a hidden rotation to catch someone off guard and then basically drops on the person and then primals and gets a lot of value. One more really cool thing to this, sorry, I keep thinking, I'm trying to like give this as a very comprehensive Winston guide. So another really cool trick, and I'll show it to you on Dorado. It has to do with the same concept of anti-LOS, but this is a little bit more. You'll see what I mean by anti-LOS jumps with this example. So, for instance, when you're playing Winston on this map, what you can do is I have to get there first. Time skip, time skip, time skip. Okay, so a lot of people were like able to always like soft dive, and you know, you push cart, you do that. Your team normally is rotating high ground, which is what they should do. Why? Whoops. Why? Because you know you want to be able to pressure the Winston up here, and the only way you're going to be able to do that is by putting like your range-based damage or your backline up there. Like if your Kiriko up here, you're able to shoot the Winston, force that Winston out, which is ideal. Now and then is Winston, you jump over here to like pinch with your team. Pinching is very good, and you maybe trap someone in the middle. If you do, that's great. But the idea that I want to talk about here is the concept of where you sort of like want to actually go maybe on the people over there. Oh man, I messed up. People over there. And you want to do another pinch play. So what you'll do is you'll drop over here, and then you'll jump over like this, and then you'll drop like this, and then you'll pinch the person in between. Now this jump suits two purposes. It suits a purpose of pinching, where essentially you're sandwiching some enemy right over here. Your team walks up also from that side and shoots them, and you guys essentially, by putting a bubble here, you block the enemy team behind and you kill this person. But it also is a very good jump because the enemy team can't see you beforehand, so they're not able to flail you, like 5-orb you, or do a bunch of damage to you. So, yep. I hope this makes sense, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure to like and subscribe. Okay, so today I want to talk about essentially how to play Winston at a really high level, like someone like Gushue or Fearless. And the different ways to essentially play Winston, so you can understand based off what type of tempo your team wants to exert. So if you want to play first, how to like play position first and be aggressive if you want to play second and you want to let the enemy team in, or if you want to do something called passive tempo where you're sort of applying pressure, and then you look to kite, how to do all of that. So like I said, there are essentially 3 different ways of playing any composition in terms of tempo. You look to play first and you sort of like int, right? You go really aggressive. You play second, where you look to sort of give space, and then you sort of engage on when you think like you have an advantage or off a trigger. And there's something called passive tempo. Passive tempo is where you make it looks like you're going first, but in fact you're actually going second. So in all of these different situations, there's different ways to approach it. So when you're generally, these are the 3 ways. Now in the composition, there are a few ways that just generally happen. So the first is sort of like corner to corner, which is sort of you're like essentially poking. So that handwriting is not neat. And we'll see some examples of this, corner to corner, where you're like poking. And you're sort of going for, you know, essentially getting some trigger where you have some advantage, whether it is a CD advantage, or maybe you have an alt advantage, or maybe you have an HP advantage. And then once you have that, you'll like go more aggro. Okay. Then other than that, you have inting, where you just sort of just like, you just int and you just go hyper aggressive and you look to just kill somebody. Okay. You just go like super in. which is like essentially just going for, which is essentially just going first. Then you have the concept of passive tempo, where you look to position and you're you're looking like you're going first, but you're actually backing up. Okay, I'm gonna go and explain it above. Let me get the eraser. So let me first look at the corner to corner example. Okay, let's look at this one right over here. So right over here, we're looking at Spark versus London. If you look at this example right over here, we'll keep sound a little bit on here. I can't hear it, but right over here, if you look at this, you're seeing that both Winston, one team is essentially in the hotel and the other Winston's right outside. So how this works is there's a choke right over here and a choke right over here. And, you know, when this team comes out, they are pushing into, let's actually do it this way. There's a choke right over here and choke right over here. And when this team comes out, they're pushing into Pink's kill box. If Pink were to go inside said choke and push in here, then, you know, they'd be pushing into London's kill box, and London would eventually have an advantage. And you only want to push into the blue kill box, London's, you know, advantage, if you had some advantage. They were all one, you know, they had no CDs, then you'd push aggro. They only want to push out to Pink when they have some advantage, or they're going to try and be explosive and try and do something. Okay, so if we watch this, notice sort of the pokes happening and they're chilling. Now, when you're in this situation where you're sort of have map control, you can see here you have map control and you have point, you have space here. In this position here, it's really nice because you have map control plus your Sojourn in this situation has way more space to do things. Your Sojourn's like free to do things. But sometimes this may not always happen. So for instance, an example of this won't happen. Let me pull up insights. So when we look at a map like this, if the first fight you decide to, you know, go over here and take map and control here, you again are controlling the map and you're controlling the point, so your team will cap. And the choke is technically right over here. Depends where you're holding. We'll talk about this example a bit more in depth. But your choke's right over here and you have point control, so you'll be able to cap, but the enemy team technically has all of this space, which allows their Sojourn in this situation to roam more. But the enemy team, guess what, has to push through this choke, and that's advantageous for, you know, you, because they have to push through that choke. That means they have to get some advantage. And if we were to look at this other example right over here, this is what a lot of Koreans like doing, is they like to jump, Korean teams, they like to jump and take control of the point. And a lot of other teams will actually jump and play in here. And then what the Korean team will then do is they'll walk up and then they'll hold these chokes, and it's the same exact concept. Where, you know, the Sojourn can sort of be explosive and push out through here, but the Pink team has control of point, so they're able to cap. So they're all about like controlling the map space and making it hard for the enemy team to push through. So that's sort of what you're actually seeing right over here. They're controlling the map space and the enemy team has to push through. Granted, hotel here isn't the best. There's only 2 options, but it's still not bad. So right over here, you can see that Hottie jumps. He sort of goes around the car, so he's playing around a corner, and the rest of the team is sort of cleaving on all the squishies. And what's really interesting about this is, you know, in this situation, Alpha Yi and Gushue aren't actually stacked. Can you guess why they aren't stacked here? Because if Alpha Yi and Gushue were together here, would Gushue jump up this early?
No, probably not, because he has the Reaper pressure with him.
Yeah, right. So his front line's strong. But because Reaper Alpha Yi's not with him, he's forced to jump early. Can you sort of think about what is happening here because of that? Think about here. Let me show you this here. Look where Gushue ends up jumping.
Okay.
He ends up jumping on the statue. Why is this relevant? Is the Reaper able to really do much on him there?
Not really.
Yeah, so he's able to jump to a position where he's able to hold space for quite a while, and it's hard for Reaper, other people, to do damage to him. And the Winston, right? Well, Hottie, if you were just to poke on, you know, the enemy Winston in this sort of corner right over here, like right over here, they're supposed to have that corner little fight. Well, that could happen. That'd be fine. The Reaper could reposition. But generally, the Winston also, the only other logical place the Winston could jump is actually right over here, in which Alpha U was already set up to hold that corner and hold that environment. Yeah. And now you can see, because the map control, Shy is able just to do so much. He's sort of free to do whatever. Because what ended up happening is this corner was held, this corner was held, hence Shy is just free to do whatever. And because Gushui knew that he had to jump, and he jumped over here and was able to live and abuse high grounds, he did a really good job and was able to live over time. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So another example of sort of this corner fight is we'll look at right over here. So again, it's sort of the corner fight. Now in this situation, we're actually going to see the Winston and Reaper are fully stacked on each other, right? Because it's a corner to corner. There's not really many other places, you know, someone may be engaged. So it's sort of going to be who's going to force CDs first. So this is all it is. Look, maybe an E goes in. Notice Shy gets a pick on Backbone, and that's huge. Obviously, Gushui puts Bubble down. Sparker uses E. So Gushui's down Bubble, Hadi has Bubble, but the Reaper's dead, which then means these guys inherently have a stronger front line, so they can push. The biggest thing is they don't push too early when Gushui doesn't have armor, because it's possible that he could die. However, enemy team doesn't have Reaper, it's a lot harder for Gushui to die. So this is like mid-fight understanding, and, you know, we can go more into this later, but understanding how, you know, your team's picks, you know, enable you to be more aggressive, or you have to be more passive, is critical, as well as understanding, like, if certain people on your team die, what happens then, and just being on the same page. So right over here, you'll see in a second, you notice how he waited, Bubble was right there, and now he's going to go explosive. So he actually jumped in here and went really aggressive. Why? The logic was that, hey, I have my Bubble now, I've got resources, I can go aggro, their Reaper isn't going to be back yet, we can take more space. Unfortunately, when that happened, Sparker ended up getting killed, so we'll see what happens now. He will probably end up kiting. Notice how instantly he closed that corner, he backs up to another corner. From here, if he needs to back up further, he can jump all the way back there. So note how he's still holding space and looks like he's aggressive, but because he's got movement, he's able to back up and keep backing up and kiting. This is a concept of ebb and flow where you're pushing and pulling. And by him playing up here, this is making the enemy team to think that, okay, we have to pressure him out. Whether it's pressuring out using CDs, using alts, or just nothing, and just taking time to pressure out, that time gives time for Alpha E to come back. So right over here, he's just holding as long as possible. Then he kites back here. And now, again, they're kiting and they're just trying to live. And it's a really high level. If you think about this, what's happening here, both these people have mobility. Both these people can jump back here if needed. But they're just buying time till Reaper's back, and then they can have a full push. And the question is there enough time for this to happen? That's a separate issue. But they're also buying enough time for who? Shy to maybe get lucky and get a pick. And there's the pick. And now they'll be able to push in. And what's interesting, if you notice this, why does London int really hard here?
Because they lost the player, and they're already kind of...
They lost a player, and if the fight goes really long, Alpha E will be back, and they'll inherently lose. So they realize that they need to int right over here and go with the fact that they have Reaper Winston to try and get a kill. So they actually int here for this purpose. See, they're trying to get a trade instantly, and that's what ends up happening. But now they're trapped in a closed space. What type of situation does this look like right over here? What we're seeing here, where they're inside and, like, you know, Gushui's outside.
Well, smart control a lot of the, I guess, like the choke ways out when they Shy has free range.
Yep, it's like that corner to corner thing, right? Or like the you know, or choke to like one team's on one choke, one team's on the outside choke, and it's the same thing we talked about. It's like the same default. What I want you to understand is, like, this situation will happen on a lot of places, and I want you to be able to recognize that. So we'll just let this fight finish, and then we'll talk about another example. So now they go forward, they back up. And by them doing that, by the way, they were also buying time for their respawns to come in. And now they're pushing in really hard. And they back up. And they basically, by them doing that, you know, Terra was forced to use ult. So I'll stop here. But do you understand the concept of sort of like, you know, both teams sort of playing corners? There's a choke. One team having more outside space and map control. One team sort of trying to push through.
Yep.
Cool. So now that's the first, right? That's the corner to corner. That's this. And this can happen, you know, in multiple different situations. Where's my... I don't know where it went. But this can happen in multiple situations. Like, this can happen in a neutral fight. This can also happen when you have map control. Okay? This can also happen when you're retaking space. This can happen in, like, any type of game state. Okay? Now, let's look at the next example. So this is an example of inting. So what I mean by this is a team that, you know, they're just looking to go really aggressive and sort of catch someone by surprise and try and get instant value.
And inting can happen generally, again, neutral fight. It can happen when you have map control. It can happen when you don't have map control. Generally, it's better when you have map control because it involves some type of setup. So Gushue sort of playing up. Again, looking like he's a little bit aggressive, and then he backs up. And now notice how he sort of, again, hides this corner, and alt comes in, and they go hyper aggressive. They completely ignore, you know, the Winston and the Reaper, and they just go super hard in, and then instantly go for the Sojourn. Why is he going for the Sojourn in this situation?
Because it's the easiest target for the Winston.
Especially with what situation right over here. There's something else that's happening here that also makes it the best situation.
The Primal Rage.
He has a Primal, right? So generally when you're playing Winston, you have Primal, like going on Sojourn super OP because you just jump on the Sojourn, Sojourn shift, and you jump again on the Sojourn, Sojourn probably dies. So that's sort of what's happening here. Is an example of an int play. But what's really critical to understand is how Gushue set up on the sides, so he doesn't take any early poke, and when the alt comes in, you know, he's able to go explosive. Gushue could have also maybe hid somewhere up here or the other, like, you know, the little window there on that side. He could have hid maybe over there and waited for the enemy team to walk and then, you know, dropped on them, team pushed in, and just gone really fast. The idea is the enemy team doesn't really know where he is, or if they know where he is, they can't poke him out. Okay? Because if you get poked out as Winston, then you can't really press the W key.
Yeah.
Or you will, but you'll, like, don't have armor, which is really bad. So here's this really aggressive push. Notice how he's, you know, he's coming back now, and then he comes back and pushes people back into the team. So that was very clean. Now I want to show one more example. I'm gonna actually have to find it because I think it's a very good example done by actually Carpe. So this is again another example. If you look at this fight right over here, this fight is like very hard for Philly to win. They have one ult. The enemy team technically has double support ult. When you have double support ult, inherently it's like ball comp, where if you got rally and trance, you have an inherent advantage and you can just technically win. So in this situation, this is like very favorable for London. Now, if you notice what Carpe does, he does a really cool telly where he can't be seen here, and he tellies over here, still can't be seen. He'll path right over here, and then he'll look to do a really early engage. Again, I call it like an int engage. Now, if you look, you'll see him like right over here. So notice Winston jumps in first, which looks sort of like a throw. It's like, why are you jumping in as Winston? We know when you play Winston, you don't normally jump in unless you're hard engaging, right? You walk up and you take space and you jump, you know, out to live, or you jump up if, you know, the Sojourn can't see you. But see Carpe right over here? He comes in and he Reaper ults. And now all of a sudden, you know, Zuzu, bubble, you know, amp speed, and that was a hard int, and they're able to try and get some value. Granted here, the enemy team used Beat and Kitsune, and that Reaper ult essentially forced 2. And notice instantly after that happens, Winston jumps back and everyone backs up. So not only do they force an ult, they force 2 ults, but they get a kill. They're able to live. And now the problem is Bell Rosa, if you notice here, he's trying to hold a lot of proactive space, but that's very risky. So he backs up, plays point. Now they chill here. And now if we watch this, what ends up happening, let's see who ends up winning. Goes in, Primal, looks to try and get some value. Unfortunately, doesn't really. Sparker pushes in with ult and sort of manages to get the kill. So the logic was there. Did it end up winning the fight? No, it didn't. But the logic was there. So this is an example, another example of just sort of like an int play, okay? So now what I'm going to show you is the other way of playing, which is sort of like you're sort of playing second, you're giving space, and then you sort of look to abuse that. Like the fact that you give space, but you have like maybe the important space on the map, and you abuse that. And normally this involves you maybe abusing verticality, enemy team being low ground, or abusing the fact that they... Okay, so here's the start of this fight. We see very cool Butterfingers, but note how, you know, Spark's on high ground, Gooseway is just poking, he's vibing, Super Rich sort of feeds, they're down one, so they inherently, again, have to play slow. So as soon as you're playing slow, you're not going to, like, you know, Winston over here, enemy Winston over here, you're not going to do that little, like, you know, Winston plus Reaper, you know, little corner-to-corner poke-off match. You're going to play slower, right? You're going to give the enemy team space. So right over here, you can notice, if you notice right over here, Gooseway is playing very slow. He's playing right over here in a position where if he backs up, enemy team is all low ground, nobody with range damage can shoot him. He's able to hold space on the map while still, you know, doing stuff. Notice how everyone on the team is actually trying to shoot him out, but they can't do anything because he just plugs the corner. So now what Toddy ends up doing is trying to push the Sojourn and to try and get value. Now Gushue jumps up on top of the gas station. So Gushue still holding space, playing very slow, but controlling the map and abusing high grounds. Not doing anything crazy, but basically denying London so they can't take the high ground, and they're forced to play low. Same thing. So right over here, if you look at this, all of this high ground space is theirs and this space. So London is forced to play low ground, which isn't necessarily very good. And by abusing high ground, what you can always do is you can just drop on somebody. Let's say this was a Reaper, for instance, or like, let's say you just drop on this Reaper. Is that Reaper going to be forced to Wraith? Yeah, he's going to Wraith, right? And when you, just because you're dropping on him, you're not using your Reaper Wraith, you're not using your bubble yet, you just force a free Reaper Wraith. That gives you an inherent CD advantage and a trigger advantage for your team to push forward. And this is happening. Why? Because you've got verticality advantage. You get what I'm getting at? You have like map control and you've got a really OP spot. So you may not be going first. You may not be holding really aggressive space, you know, like holding this corner. But by you sort of tunneling them all to play low ground and sort of in this area and controlling important space, you're in a very good spot. So note right over here, he drops on it, forces it, and what does he do? He jumps back high ground. And now if you look at this again, they're all still stacked. He's still over here, and he's just vibing. And so the whole concept is he's just going to constantly drop to keep getting value. And Hadi's smart. He realizes that, hey, if we don't clear this side of the map and keep getting angled on, this isn't going to go well. So Hadi tries to take another side. And now look, they're sort of just abusing the high ground here. And he just keeps dropping and going up. This is like ping-ponging. Except guess what? You only have one tank. You don't have two tanks anymore. Just ping-ponging. And that's a huge E. And now again, look, they use bubble and Winston's low. This could be a trigger for them saying, hey, Winston's really low. Do we want to drop and commit? They could if they want. It just depends on the situation. They force Chiriko fade too. Do they want to commit? And they end up dropping in this corner here, which again is another corner where he can like play around. Team's able to help him. The enemy team has to push into him. And guess what? With the enemy team pushing in, all of these people have LOS that can peel. So it ends up being a bait play almost, and they get a lot of value because of it. And again, he just jumps back up to that like sort of high ground, but he didn't need to because they're up one, and you know they've got heals and a bubble advantage, so they end up winning. So if you look at this, they're just playing second and abusing verticality, giving space, and sort of just ping-ponging point until they sort of get a trigger that values them, letting the DPS do what they need to do. So again, same thing right over here. They hold sort of aggressive space, and if you actually look at this, they're holding really aggressive space. Right over here, this is like a very OP spot for Winston because you can hold here and not many people can go on you. So he's just holding here and you can always jump out if needed. Enemy team is playing low ground, so he's just sort of chilling. Shy's playing there. Enemy's on high ground. The enemy Winston tries to soft dive high ground but can't do anything. And now they push, but can't do much. Yeah, notice that corner-to-corner poke thing. Notice how instantly Gushue goes above, where nobody can see him, and he's sort of able just to live here. They try and push him, but he's full HP. The butt jump. Same thing, right? Just like holding this high ground, just controlling the important space on the map. Like, this is the important space on the map, technically. You control this, you force everyone lower, you will just win the long fight by angling them. You have so much time. They can push point as much as they want. In fact, it's even great if they push point. Why? This is like a terrible place for Reaper to play. This is open space. You shoot Reaper, you force like, you know, Wraith. It's just so bad. Note how they Zuzu. They used Wraith. They had to use a bunch of tags just to like keep Backbone alive. Look how much damage Hadi's playing. Do you see how like bad this is for them?
Yeah.
And now look at this cleave that he's getting. And he drops, and then from here he's got Primal, and then he decides to go in because he realizes that, hey, you know what? I can probably get some value here. Okay. So now, higher level question now is how do you counter this? How do you get out of the shitty position that London is in, where they are on this low ground and they do not have map control? So the first thing is don't push Heart in open space and, you know, lose, you know, Zuzu and a bunch of resources. Yes, push high ground is good. When you push high ground, who are you scared of? Who's like the biggest threat?
The soldier in.
The enemy like range damage, which is going to be the Sojourn. So you would probably have to like soft dive that to give your Sojourn more space. So as long as you do that, push high ground, great. Might have to use an ultimate. If you need to, you need to. But then you push the high ground, you go from there, you soft dive. And then you just sort of keep approaching that. You keep trying to like take this side of the map and you'll be good. Another way of approaching this also is like trying to flip the map. and pushing them like that. Another way is sort of what they tried to do, which is push under, but be very tactical about it, where you're really living in here and you're not using too many resources. When you get low, you sort of chill and you sort of turtle and you just keep pushing, and then you turtle again over here and you just like keep doing that. But that's very tricky, and as you can see, it didn't work out very well for them.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's here's also the final tech that I think not a lot of Winstons understand, but this tech comes from really good sneaky pathing. So this is like a unique thing. I've already covered like the 3 main ways to play Winston, right? Which is sort of the corner to corner type of thing, where it sort of happens in neutrals, when you map control, when you're retaking space. The int thing, where you will just like int in, and go really hyper aggressive. Normally when you've got map control, because it's easier to set up. That was these 2 examples, and then I also talked about the going second, where you're sort of hidden. You would bait the enemy team into you, maybe use verticality, and you get value that way. The last cool tech is this concept of doing a rotation where they don't see you, and you sort of catch someone off guard like this, and you sort of just drop on them, and then you primal and you get a kill. And this is a very sneaky rotation, and it comes because the enemy team can't see you. By him doing this is like essentially like the anti-LOS. So this is just a very simple Winston tech that's really critical to understand. The other thing that's really important to understand is when you're playing Winston, keep in mind jumping up is very good, as long as when you're jumping up, the enemy Sojourn can't see you. And even if the enemy Sojourn can't see you, it's still better. It's still decent because the Reaper can't do damage to you. But when you jump up, Sojourn and Kiriko are your biggest, things you got to be scared of. But if, maybe they're like over here and they can't see you, then jumping up is great because it'll gives you a bunch of time to get heals from your Kiriko and Lucio, and then you get your jump pack damage as well, and you're still holding the same corner you had. Okay? So these are the 3 main styles of playing Winston. Any general questions?
I guess like for this instance of pathing, should I be like looking to do it whenever possible, or more so like when I have like ultimate?
It's ideally done when you've got primal, because it's
Okay.
very greedy, right? It's a really risky play. Like you need the primal, you use primal to get that extra jump and stuff, so you can essentially get a kill. Okay. I'll also show you another example. I just want to show you right over here. So an example of also sort of playing second. Passive tempo. So passive tempo, I forgot to mention really fast, but that's also important. And what passive tempo is maybe you'll hold really close up so that the enemy team like sees you here and they're like scared of you. And oops, wrong thing. So you play like right over here, and maybe you and Reaper are here, maybe your Sojourn's there, the enemy team is pushing forward. And essentially how this works is you aren't planning on actually playing this aggro. You are planning on just holding space here, and when the enemy team actually pushes in, what you're planning on doing is just kiting. And the idea is you apply so much pressure that the enemy team maybe uses Primal to start, or Sojourn ult, or Kitsune Rush. So they use some ultimate or even some CDs to take space, and then you kite to again buy time and live, and then you push back in. That's part of ebb and flow. But the concept is you're aggressively holding space, so you look scary. Okay. And I'll show you one more example of playing second that does not include verticality, because playing second without verticality on a flat map can be tricky. So for instance, right over here, you can hide your Winston right over here. That's a bad color. Hide your Winston right over here, and the enemy team can push in, and then the rest of your team can maybe play over here, and then your Winston can just sort of come behind, bubble, and your team can sort of push. And because they can't see your Winston or don't know your Winston's there, your Winston can get away with this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Cool. Well, thank you. And for any people who are watching on YouTube, I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe.